All right, this is a story about the third Rebbe of Chabad. We learned yesterday, I think the day before, that the third Rebbe of Chabad, called the Tzemach Tzedik, he was put under house arrest 22 times in just one, I guess, 1 month period, because he defied the orders and the the protocol in the of the Tsar. The Tsar wanted to limit Jewish education and to put non-Jewish ideas into the education. He wanted also even to teach ideas of science and everything, which, I mean, the science back then, this was like 150 years ago, is totally different than science now. Most of the ideas are debunked anyway. Anyway, and so all the other rabbis were pretty much, they were quiet. They were afraid, simply they were afraid. And they figured we'll get by somehow or other. We'll agree, but if we make the Tsar or one of his ministers mad, then it's really going to be bad for everybody. But the third Rebbe of Chabad didn't think that way. He thought, I'm not thinking about what the results are. I'm not going to compromise. I'm not making any compromises. And because of that, he defied the order, so he was put under house arrest. So 22 times. Okay, I don't know if this story occurred in in the meeting that he was talking about, the 22 times, but it could be. So here's the story. Here's the story. So they made one of these big meetings, and they invited, in this case, there wasn't an apostate. The story I told yesterday, there was an apostate. And he said, Tov Shabbagoyim Katol, remember I said? But this time, so the Tsar wanted to make, the Minister of Education, he wanted to make changes in the educating children. And there was, see if I got this thing right. Yeah, I think this is the way it goes. So the Rebbe, he said, oh, wait, let's make a vote. We're going to take a vote. Should we change the system or not? It could be that, or maybe the subject is that they wanted to forbid the writings of Kabbalistic books. It could be that that's what it was, that he wanted to do. In any case, it was the government against the Jews. Now, the Alter Rebbe, there was this minister, and then there was the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, the third Rebbe of Chabad, and there was another religious Jew, and then there was a fellow called Stern. And this fellow Stern, he was a assimilated Jew, and he was all for, getting rid of these books or changing the education, whatever it was, he was all for. So he said, let's make a vote. We're going to make a vote. The vote is, should we change or not? So, of course, the Rebbe voted against making these changes. And the other religious Jew that was there, I think his name was Halperin, he also voted against making the changes. And this fellow Stern, he voted, you should make the changes. You should change the education. It doesn't be so religious. So the minister said, okay, there's two of you are against making the changes, and this Stern and me are for making the changes. And so that's 50-50. It's uncertain if we should make the changes or not, but it's also uncertain that we should not make the changes. So therefore, we're making the changes. We're going to make the changes. So the Rebbe stood up and he said, Al tigu b'mashichai. You're not going to touch the children. I'm not going to change. You can do whatever you want to. So they put him under house arrest, put him in the room. It happened to be that it was Erev Shabbos. Erev Shabbos. They put him in the next room and they locked the door. They put 2 guards on the room. So the Rebbe was in the room and he started to say, Pasach Eliyahu. That's right. Now I remember this. So Pasach Eliyahu is from the introduction. We learned a little bit about it, if you remember, in Torah or just, what was it? Last week, we learned about it. Antu Chad Belo B'Chushman. It's a Kabbalistic thing explaining the 10 Sfirot of God. So he said this, but he said it in a beautiful melody. So the minister, he was trying to speak and he couldn't. He heard the melody and it was just so beautiful that he couldn't concentrate. He couldn't speak. So he asked the other religious Jew, what is he saying in the next room? And the other religious Jew, I think this is a Halperin, he said, he's saying from one of those books that you want to forbid. So he said, okay, bring him out. They brought him into the room. He said, okay, you two are against making the changes. And me and this fellow Stern, we're for making the changes. So it's undecided. It's undecided. Therefore, we'll have a revote tomorrow. Not like what I just finished saying, that because it's not clear we shouldn't, right? It's not, there's no clear opposition, so we're going to make the changes. We'll talk about it tomorrow. So we let him out. The Rebbe was walking back to his hotel. So he said to the person who was accompanying him, let's walk through the park. Usually we avoid walking through the park because there were a lot of not nice things there, and there was things that were not modest and things like that. So he would take a little bit of a longer journey. They would go back to the hotel. But this time he said, let's go through the park. So they walked through the park, and there was this fellow Stern sitting there smoking a cigarette. Shabbat. It was Shabbat in the nighttime. So we walked up to the Stern, and he said to him, do you believe in the world to come, in heaven? Now, this fellow Stern did not believe in heaven. He did not believe in hell. He didn't believe in anything. He was a total apostate, atheist. But he saw the Rebbe and the Rebbe's countenance and the Rebbe's face, and it made a very sort of a strange impression on him. And he said, yes, yes, I do. And he said, if you want a portion in heaven, then tomorrow vote against making the changes. So he said, okay, I will. So they shook hands. He shook hands. Give him his hand. He shook hands. And it was a sign of agreement to shake hands. Before he left, the Tzemach Tzedik, the Stern, said to the Tzemach Tzedik, but I want to ask you two questions. He said, yeah, what is it? He said, they've just revealed in science that there's a certain vein, two veins in a person's head, and that when a person wants to remember something, then he pulls his head back, that opens up that vein. And it opens up. And when a person wants to think deeply, he puts his head down, and that opens up the second vein. It closes the door. This one, and it opens up the second vein. If everything is in the Torah, where is that in the Torah? And he said, I'll tell you where it is. It's in Shir Hashirim. He said there's a book on Shir Hashirim, and it says, I will be like dew to the Jewish people. And it says in this book, there's a very similar story told about the second Rebbe of Chabad also. It says in this book that exactly what you said. Look in the book and you'll see exactly what you said. And he said, okay, I have another question. He said, yes. He said, if God is really infinite, and you believe, can God make another God? So the Rebbe said, yes. And he did. Where it says, we'll learn in a couple of weeks, that he said that God called Yaakov Elokei Israel. He called God, Yaakov the God of Israel. He said, some people say that what it means is that he made an altar over there and he called it by the name of it. He says, no, but he said he called God, Yaakov, by the name of God. And this is a thing which is totally incomprehensible. That's what he said. So Stern went the next day and they made the vote, and Stern voted against it, and so it was. And in the end, Stern, after this whole thing, he went home and he koshered his whole kitchen, and he started doing commandments and keeping Shabbat, and changed his whole entire life. An interesting story about the third Rebbe of Chabad and the importance of defying world pressure. and how that if we do so, that it'll benefit the whole entire world. Not just it will escape destruction, but it actually will save the world from destruction. Will bring the whole entire world to realize that God is one and his name is one, and that God is creating everybody, and he wants everyone to be healthy and happy in this physical world. Have a good Shabbos with Mashiach now, and we'll see each other, God willing, on Sunday, 8:15 in the morning. God bless
with
you.
Mashiach.
Shalom.
Amen.